Evaluating relics in Nightreign is a nightmare. The game doesn't give you numbers, doesn't explain what stacks, and never tells you what random combos are even possible. I play every Nightfare in Depth 5, and today I'm breaking down the strongest relic combinations you can realistically build, along with the ones worth chasing if you want the best builds in Nightreign. If you want to dig deeper into what individual effects do, I've linked fantastic community-made resources in the description. This includes relics.pro created by Chris, and the Nightreign useful info sheet created by Slay, Unlined-Betters, and Emerald Wolf. Because of how strong certain DLC relics are, Nightreign's meta has become incredibly centralized. Right now, almost every optimized setup in Deep of Night falls into one of three build archetypes: Invader builds, Successive builds, and Skill builds. Most Nightfares don't run these in isolation. You'll usually see hybrid builds that borrow from two or even all three. Invader builds are the most flexible, but they rely heavily on random relic rolls. Every Invader build revolves around the effect attack power increased for each Night Invader defeated. This effect gives you a 7% damage boost per Invader kill. You can get up to 4 Invaders in Deep of Night for a 31% boost. Fighting Invaders early, sometimes as soon as level 2, is a common strategy because you're rewarded with a large damage boost, multiple levels, and early purple weapons you can use immediately. Successive builds are melee builds built around Undertaker's Remembrance Relic, Glass Necklace. Successive attacks boost attack power is a unique effect on Glass Necklace, and it's possibly bugged. The intended boosts seem to be 6%, 10.5%, and 15% as you climb the tiers through consecutive hits. But instead of replacing earlier tiers, the tiers stack, giving you 6%, then 17%, then 35% bonus damage. Unless this gets patched, this relic is worth an entire slot, as long as you can maintain the stacks. Skill builds revolve around two guaranteed boss relics, the Will of the Balancers and the Will of Balance. The Will of the Balancers increases melee attack power by 6% and weapon skill damage by 15%. If you're using a melee-based skill, that's effectively a 21% damage boost. The FP gain is minor, but the offensive value alone makes this relic extremely strong. The Will of Balance stacks directly with it, offering the same damage bonuses plus a defensive effect that occasionally nullifies damage. Together, these two relics give you a 12% boost to melee damage and a massive 48% increase to melee-based skills. Skill builds also lean heavily on dormant power effects. Every Nightfare has an innate chance to discover weapons from their preferred weapon class, but a dormant power effect overrides that preference and replaces it with its own weapon pool. The strongest dormant power options for skill builds come from weapon classes with very small purple pools and extremely powerful weapon skills. This lets you reliably target farm specific skills instead of gambling on drops. For example, there are only 2 purple Reapers, so running dormant power helps discover Reapers gives you a very consistent path to Halo Scythe. I want to be upfront about this, I do not recommend running Evergaol in Deep of Night. Attack power increased for each Evergaol prisoner defeated used to be the strongest single effect in the game. In fact, it's still one of the strongest effects outside of Deep of Night. Each Evergaol cleared gives you a 5% damage boost, and on the base map there are 7 jails, for a potential 40% increase. In Deep of Night though, Evergaols are far less reliable. A bad jail is a huge time sink, and you have no control over shifting earths, which means you can get a map with no jails. Because of how powerful Invader and Balancer relics are, your time is almost always better spent hunting Invaders, weapon passives, and weapons with strong skills. There are a few effects that are always good, but usually fall just outside the core of an optimized build. Defeating enemies fills more of the arc gauge, and its +1 version give you 5 and 6.5 gauge per kill. They don't stack with themselves, but they do stack with each other, for a total of 11.5 gauge per enemy defeated. You don't even have to kill them yourself. Both effects are extremely desirable for everyone except Duchess, Executor, and Guardian, who often save their ultimates for specific situations. When it comes to survivability, Dark Knight of the Fathom is the only defensive relic that consistently earns a slot. Its increased maximum HP effect gives you a flat 100 HP, which is massive at early levels when your total health pool is still low. The increased maximum HP effect on depth relics shares the same name but is a 10% increase instead of a flat 100 HP. Fathom's passive healing also helps you recover from chip damage, or top off when a flask barely misses full health. To understand what a god roll looks like, you have to understand the rules for random relics. Random relics cannot have duplicate effects and can only have one effect from each category. A category is a group of similar effects that can't appear together. For example, Invader and Evergaol are both part of the attack power category, so they can't appear on the same relic. Here are the key categories to keep in mind. The rules don't apply to guaranteed relics from bosses, shops, or remembrances. For example, Witch's Brooch, or if you're evil, Cracked Witch's Brooch has 2 character-specific effects on it. You will never see this on a randomly generated relic. A God Roll relic is one that has an optimal attack power effect, paired with 2 effects that directly support the build you're playing. Most of the time, that attack power effect is Invader, and one of those supporting effects is a strong character-specific bonus. For casters, the final slot is usually an improved spell school effect. All of these builds are for Deep of Night. If you want a non-Deep of Night setup, swapping out Invader for Evergaol will give you a solid build. Before we get into individual characters, I want to explain how I'm organizing the builds. I'll be sorting relic effects into 2 groups. Priority 1 effects are best in slot for the build, while Priority 2 effects are strong supporting options but can be swapped freely. To keep these builds realistic, I'm limiting myself to 2 Priority 1 effects per relic. That way you don't need perfect rolls to put these setups together. Effects will be listed in order of importance, not the order that they appear on relics in-game. I won't go in depth on every single effect, but I will break down the ones that matter the most. For everything else, check the links in the description. One last disclaimer before we move on. There is no single correct way to build a Nightfare. Specialized setups for certain Night Lords can be extremely powerful, and sometimes the best build is the one that fits your playstyle or your RNG. Think of these as strong starting points. If you don't like an effect, don't run it. Wylder has 3 main builds: Pure Skill, Invader Skill, and Invader Successive. A Pure Skill build runs the Wylder's Earring, since it's the only way to fit both key character effects. Plus 1 additional character skill use lets you extend combos more often, reliably trigger successive attack bonuses, and safely revive teammates from range. Art Activation spreads fire in area, adds a bit of damage over time, and helps shred bosses that are weak to frostbite, but its real value is revive potential. When Wylder uses his ultimate with this effect, it revives for 2.5 bars, and you don't need to charge your ult to get this benefit. That means Wylder can consistently 3-bar revive, which makes him one of the strongest anchors in the game. If you want to pivot into an Invader skill build, you'll need to drop one of these effects to make room for Invader. When it comes to depth relics, you'll want Character Skill Inflicts Blood Loss, and a Dormant Power effect. Character Skill Inflicts Blood Loss reliably procs bleed once or twice per fight, just for using Claw Shot, something you were already doing anyway. A Dormant Power effect changes Wylder's increased chance to discover greatswords to another weapon class. This allows you to target weapons with powerful skills. Good examples are Reapers for Halo Scythe, or Great Hammers for Cranial Vessel Candlestand. You'll also want to run improved Affinity Attack Power +2, since some of the best weapon skills deal pure affinity damage. If you move into an Invader Successive build, your depth relic priority slightly shifts. These setups prefer Dormant Power effects for weapons that excel at successive attacks, like Fists or Twin Blades, and may opt for Physical Attack up +4 if most of their damage ends up being physical. As Guardian, you really need the right tools to make a shield build work in Depth 5. Once you commit to these tools, there simply isn't enough relic space to support successive or skill builds, so Shield Guardian naturally ends up as an Invader build. You can ditch the shield, throw on Balancer relics, and play him like budget Wylder, and if that's the route you want to take, the build is exactly what you'd expect. But if you want the real shield experience and you want Guardian to work the way his kit is designed, here's how to build him. For the strongest shield setup, Guardian needs Stamina Recovery upon landing attacks, and Stamina Recovery upon landing attacks +1. Just like defeating enemies fills more of the arc gauge, these effects do not stack with themselves, but do stack with each other. They're absolutely essential for maintaining stamina, but there's a catch. The +1 version is exclusive to Knight of the Beast and Dark Knight of the Beast. Guardian's other priority effects on normal relics are Successful Guards send out shockwaves while ability is active, increased duration for character skill, and slowly restores nearby allies' HP while art is active. To fit all 3 effects and Dark Knight of the Beast, we need to use Witch's Brooch, which comes with 2 of the effects. Successful Guards send out shockwaves while ability is active is the backbone of the whole build. It lets you deal damage while guarding, and that damage activates Stamina Recovery upon landing attacks. With both effects working together, you can guard and guard poke basically forever. Increased duration for character skill completely shuts down smaller enemies, and can trivialize what would normally be dangerous encounters. Just like the shockwave effect, it also triggers Stamina Recovery upon landing attacks. Slowly restores nearby allies' HP while art is active, turns your ult into a full party heal. As long as you can keep generating ults before you run out of HP, you can effectively revive and heal your team indefinitely. Moving on to depth relics, the priority effects are stamina recovery upon landing attacks, the damage boosts of your choice, and improved strength and dexterity, reduced vigor. For your damage roll, you have two main options, boosting guard counters or boosting physical damage. Improved guard counters +2 is the big number, giving you a massive 29% bonus to guard counters. The problem is that guard counters are only part of Guardian's total damage output, and in some fights, they're barely usable. Physical attack up +4 is the opposite approach. It's only a 12% increase, but it applies to all of your physical damage. For consistency across the entire run, I lean toward physical attack up, but either option is viable. Improved strength and dexterity, reduced vigor, increases Guardian strength by 9 and dexterity by 19 at the cost of 8 vigor. For Guardian, this is almost always a net positive, since the damage gain is significant and the health loss is manageable. Ironeye has two main builds, Invader Skill and Invader Successive. You can make an Invader Bow build, but it's not as powerful as melee alternatives. Invader Skill is relatively simple, so let's start there. On every Ironeye build, +1 additional character skill use is by far the most important effect. Beyond the defensive value, it lets you mark multiple targets at once and instantly remark enemies the moment a previous mark bursts. An Invader skill setup wants a dormant power effect that targets a melee weapon class with strong weapon skills. Solid dexterity options here are Reapers, Daggers, or Katana. If you pivot into Invader Successive, your dormant power priority changes. In this case, you're looking for weapon classes that excel at successive hits, like Claws, Twin Blades, or Thrusting Swords. Invader Successive builds also have room for Art Charge activation adds poison effect. When fully charged, this adds 300 poison buildup to your ultimate. Charging the ult doesn't increase its base damage, but 300 poison buildup is enough to instantly poison almost every enemy in the game. If you have defeating enemies fills more of the art gauge, opening fights with a charged ult becomes a reliable way to secure early poisons. For depth relics, the key effect is character skill inflicts heavy poison damage on poisoned enemies. This adds 70 poison buildup to marking, and if the target is already poisoned, marking deals an extra 250 damage plus 0.25% of the enemy's max HP. This obliterates low health enemies and turns marking into a meaningful source of burst damage against bosses. If you're running the poison skills, you should also run attack power up when facing poison afflicted enemy +2, which boosts your damage against poison targets by 20%. What's interesting here is that it's not an attack power effect, so it can stack alongside things like physical attack up or improved affinity attack power. Just keep in mind, like defeating enemies fills more of the art gauge, it only stacks with different versions of itself. 3 copies of +2 still gives you 20%, but stacking the normal, +1, and +2 versions gives you a massive 53% damage boost. Duchess has two main builds, a melee-focused Invader skill setup and a spell-focused Invader build. You can run a successive build, it's just not as strong as the competition. Invader skill is the newer setup, so let's start there. No matter which route you take, you really want Changes-compatible armament skill to Hoarfrost Stomp at start of Expedition. Hoarfrost Stomp is essential for turning early FP into real damage before you secure your main weapon. It clears crowds, inflicts frostbite, and deals magic damage, meaning it scales with magic attack power up or improved affinity attack power on your depth relics. A Duchess Invader skill setup does not need a dormant power effect. Her innate chance to discover daggers is already perfect for the build. Black Knife, Blade of Culling, Glintstone Chris, and Reduvia all have amazing weapon skills. If you want a dormant power effect, Reapers and Katana are solid options. On depth relics, all Duchess builds should be running Use Character Skill for brief invulnerability. This gives you 0.4 seconds of invulnerability every time you restage, letting you attack through windows where you'd normally be forced to dodge. An Invader skill setup can also consider Improved Mind and Faith, Reduced Intelligence. This increases Mind by 3 and Faith by 13 at the cost of only 5 Intelligence. It gives you extra FP, buffs Dex Faith weapons, and lets you deal respectable damage with incantations if you find a strong seal. If you instead go for a spell-focused Invader build, you'll also want improved spell school effects. These increase spell damage by 12% and don't count as attack power effects, meaning they can roll alongside Invader, Evergaol, or magic attack power up. The two most common options for Duchess are improved Crystallian Sorcery and improved Carrion Sword Sorcery, with Crystallian being far more common. If you're running spell school effects, you really want Dormant Power helps discover staves to get your build going as soon as possible. On depth relics, you'll need to choose between magic attack power up +4 or improved affinity attack power +2. Magic attack power up +4 boosts magic damage by 12%, while improved affinity attack power buffs magic, fire, lightning, and holy damage by 10%. Take magic attack power up if you're confident you'll find your sorcery early. If not, improved affinity attack power gives you more flexibility to pivot your build. Defeating enemies fills more of the art gauge is only worth running if you're also using defeating enemies while art is active ups attack power. This combo is extremely strong. Every enemy you kill during finale grants a 15% damage boost for 30 seconds, and these stacks are compounding, letting you reach absurd damage if you play it well. You also build ult while building damage stacks, so you can do this every fight. Raider's easiest setup to play is Invader Successive, but he does have two alternative options, Invader Dregs and Invader Skill. Both of those builds have real drawbacks, and we'll get to them in a bit, but let's start with Invader Successive. Damage taken while using character skill improves attack power and stamina, gives you a 10% damage boost and a 20% stamina boost for 20 seconds whenever you take damage during the start of Retaliate. It pairs perfectly with taking attacks improves attack power, which adds another 15% damage for 10 seconds. Raider's ultimate, Totem Stella, boosts your entire team's weapon damage by 15% for 30 seconds. Duration of ultimate art extended pushes that window to 45 seconds. This is nice to have, especially for longer fights, but it isn't mandatory for the build to function. If you don't care about extending ult duration, there's a guaranteed relic from the Collector's Signboard that you unlock by defeating an Everdark as Undertaker. It comes with taking attacks improves attack power and physical attack up +2, two attack power effects that can't roll together on random relics. Make sure to pick up a dormant power effect for a weapon that excels at successive attacks, like fists. Now, let's talk about Raider's other builds, starting with Invader Dregs. This setup revolves around the boss relic, the Knight of Dregs. Its key effect, status ailment gauges slowly increase attack power, gives you a small damage boost whenever you have any amount of ailment gauge on your screen. If you still have an ailment gauge after 20 seconds, you get another small boost. This can stack up to 10 times over 3 minutes, for a total damage increase of 45%. The easiest way to sustain this buff is to run a depth relic that applies rot or poison buildup while below max HP. Raider is one of the few characters with enough health to survive playing this way. The problem is consistency. Anytime you go near a Grace, you're fully healed and cleansed of status, which completely resets your stacks. That means you're constantly going out of your way to get hit between encounters just to rebuild the buff. The payoff is strong if you manage it perfectly, but the micromanagement required is unintuitive and easy to disrupt. Finally, there's Invader Skill, which has a different set of problems. To make this setup work, Raider needs significantly more FP and a better weapon pool. For FP, you can run improved mind and intelligence, reduced vigor and endurance. This increases mind by 9 and intelligence by 35 at the cost of 8 vigor and 4 endurance. At max level, that's a 47% increase to FP, but it also leaves you with 38 intelligence, which is largely wasted on this build. Raider has an innate chance to discover Great Hammers, Great Axes, and Colossal Weapons. Great Axes and Colossal Weapons have a mix of very good and very bad weapon skills. To stabilize the build, I recommend a Dormant Power effect for Great Hammers or Colossal Swords. This overrides his base discovery pool with reliable options. Revenant is a pure caster, and because of that she doesn't benefit from successive skill builds the way melee characters do. That means she's still running an old Invader setup, but with one very important upgrade. The DLC added relic effects that let you change your starting spell, and that completely fixes Revenant's biggest weakness, early game inconsistency. The best starting spell options are Lightning Spear, O-Flame, and Beast Claw, since all three belong to extremely strong spell schools. Lightning Spear is a Dragon Cult incantation, O-Flame is a Giant's Flame incantation, and Beast Claw is a Bestial incantation. The corresponding improved spell school incantation effects provide a 12% damage boost and don't count as attack power effects. If you manage to stack the matching spell school effect on every relic, that's a 97% damage increase before factoring in any other damage bonuses. If you have the space, try to fit defeating enemies fills more of the arc gauge or its +1 version. This allows you to use her ultimate constantly instead of just saving it for revives. Being able to get your ult back quickly means you can use it proactively instead of reactively. Strengthens family and allies when ultimate art is activated, gives your summons and teammates a massive 25% damage boost for 30 seconds, which makes your ult worth casting at the start of almost every fight. Trigger Ghost Flame Explosion during ultimate art activation is also strong, though it can be difficult to fit. If you have room for survivability, Dark Knight of the Fathom is an excellent option. The extra 100 HP is enormous on Revenant. That's a 50% increase at level 1 and still a 13% increase at level 15. Recluse runs a pure invader build, backed by extremely powerful character-specific effects that give her some of the highest health and damage potential in Deep of Night. The first key effect is activating Ultimate Art raises max HP. This gives you a massive 50% HP increase for 30 seconds. When the buff ends, you keep the extra HP until the next time you're hit. This dramatically improves your survivability. It lets you tank hits you normally couldn't, and if the first hit you take deals less than a third of your health bar, you stay at full HP. That means your full health damage negation passives remain active, and you can comfortably tank a second hit. The second core effect is Suffer Blood Loss and increase attack power upon art activation. This provides a 16% damage boost for 30 seconds, and also procs Blood Loss, which can trigger additional damage buffs for your team. When these effects are paired with defeating enemies fills more of the art gauge. Recluse effectively maintains near permanent access to both a 50% HP increase and a 16% or higher damage buff. Collecting Affinity Residue activates Terra Magica can be good, but it only boosts magic damage and forces you to stand still, which is extremely risky in Deep of Night. If you have space, Dark Night of the Fathom is a great pickup. It improves survivability outside of your ultimate and increases the amount of HP you gain when you ult. For Shattering Crystal setups, you'll want improved Crystallian sorcery on as many relics as possible. Other spell schools are usable, but Shattering Crystal is one of the most common spells you'll find. On Depth Relics, you'll need to choose between Magic Attack Power plus 4, Improved Affinity Attack Power plus 2, and Improved Sorceries plus 2. Most sorceries deal pure magic damage, which makes Magic Attack Power plus 4 a 12% increase, the strongest option if you're primarily casting sorceries. Improved Affinity Attack Power plus 2 offers a slightly lower 10% bonus, but it applies to magic, fire, lightning, and holy damage. That makes it better for any cocktails and spells that don't deal magic damage. Improved Sorceries plus 2 is a 10% boost to all sorcery damage, but since most sorceries don't deal physical damage, Improved Affinity Attack Power plus 2 is the better option in most situations. Executor is very straightforward to build, which makes his section shorter than most. Not because he's weak, but because he doesn't need much to function. He has two main setups, Invader Skill and Invader Successive. Let's start with Invader Skill. Executor really only has one impactful character-specific effect. Roaring restores HP while art is active. This heals you and nearby allies for 15% of their max HP whenever you roar. It adds some much-needed sustain and team value to Executor's art. On Depth Relics, you're mainly looking for Improved Affinity Attack Power plus 2. Executor's innate chance to discover Katana covers magic, fire, and lightning damage. If you need holy damage, Dormant Power helps discover Reapers can get you Halo Scythe. If you move into an Invader Successive setup, you gain a lot of flexibility. Since Executor doesn't rely on many character-specific effects, you have room for strong, guaranteed relics, like Dark Night of the Fathom, Night of the Miasma, Dark Night of the Miasma, or either of the Balancer relics. Scholar has two very different setups, Invader Skill and Throwing Pots. Let's start with Invader Skill. The centerpiece of this build is Improved Endurance and Dexterity, Reduced Intelligence and Arcane. This effect increases Scholar's Endurance by 6 and his Dexterity by a massive 40, at the cost of 4 Intelligence and 20 Arcane. At level 15, that puts Scholar at 58 Dexterity, 1 point higher than Ironeye and only 5 below Executor. This single effect turns Scholar into one of the strongest Dexterity-based characters in the entire game. This effect can only appear on Depth Relics, or on a guaranteed normal relic from the Collector's Signboard. The Signboard version is inefficient, so ideally you want this on a Depth Relic. On your normal relic, you're looking for allies targeted by character skill gain boosted attack. This gives your teammates a 20% physical damage boost and a 15% affinity damage boost for 30 seconds. You don't need to fully charge the skill to get the full effect, but you do need to have an enemy on screen. An Invader skill setup also wants a Dormant Power effect that targets a weapon class with strong skills. Solid dexterity options here are Reapers, Daggers, or Katana. Items confer effect to all nearby allies is another extremely powerful effect. It lets you share upgraded Boiled Crabs, Exalted Flesh, Pickled Foul Feet, and Starlight Shards, which are all incredibly impactful in Deep of Night. This effect can appear on normal or Depth Relics, but since you're typically running both Balancer Relics and 2 of your 3 normal relic slots, you'll need a God roll or you'll have to have this on a Depth Relic. Now let's talk about Throwing Pots. Scholar's increased carrying capacity and ability to upgrade consumables makes him the best Throwing Pot user in the game. The core effects here are improved throwing pot damage and improved throwing pot damage +1, which improve throwing pot damage by 15 and 30% respectively. Across all 6 relics, that adds up to a 234% increase to throwing pot damage. Importantly, improved throwing pot damage is not an attack power effect, which means it can stack freely with invader bonuses and elemental damage boosts like fire attack power up. Since merchants sell unlimited fire pots, fire attack power up +4 becomes a key part of the throwing pot setup and pushes this build into legitimate boss melting territory. Undertaker has 3 main builds: the melee-focused Invader Successive and Invader Skill, or a spell-based Invader set. Let's start with Invader Successive. Activating Ultimate Art increases attack power is a staple on every Undertaker build. It gives a 14% damage boost for 40 seconds every time you use your ult, even when you get your ultimate for free. Because Undertaker gets to activate her ult so often, this buff has incredibly high uptime. This effect is also built directly into Glass Necklace, which makes it completely free on successive builds. Attack power increased by landing the final blow of a chain attack adds another 12% damage for 20 seconds. This condition is easy to meet, but it does lean you toward a light attack focused playstyle. If you have a free 3rd normal relic slot, strong guaranteed options include Dark Knight of the Champion, Dark Knight of the Fathom, either of the Balancer relics, or the guaranteed Improved Dexterity, Reduced Vigor and Faith relic sold by the Collector signboard. Improved Dexterity, Reduced Vigor and Faith is otherwise exclusive to Depth relics. It increases Undertaker's Dexterity by 19 at the cost of 5 Vigor and 13 Faith. That puts her at 32 Dexterity at level 15. Most weapons have some dexterity scaling, so this is almost always a damage increase. However, it does come at the cost of 10% of your HP. Getting this effect on a normal relic is incredibly powerful, because it doesn't have to compete with high tier effects on depth relics. If you want to find out if this effect is worth running on your build, I highly recommend checking out the attack power calculator on relics.pro. Executing Art Ready's character skill either removes Trance's cooldown or grants an additional charge if Trance is already active when you ult. With this effect, Undertaker can maintain extremely high trance uptime once you learn the rhythm. I'll have an Undertaker video coming soon that breaks this interaction down in more detail. For Invader Skill, we need to drop Glass Necklace, since Chalice restrictions prevent Undertaker from running it alongside both Balancer relics. On Depth relics, you're looking for dormant power effects that target weapon classes with powerful skills. If you're aiming for high dexterity weapons like Reapers or Twin Blades, you still want improved dexterity, reduced vigor, and faith. For strength faith weapon classes like Great Hammers or Great Spears, Undertaker's base stats are already sufficient, so you don't need to force a stat conversion. Finally, for a spell-based Invader build, you're looking for improved Mind of Faith, reduced strength, alongside dormant power helps discover sacred seals. This increases Mind by 9 and Faith by 12 at the cost of 15 strength. If this video helped, like the video and subscribe for more Nightreign guides. And if you have any questions or edge cases I didn't cover, drop them in the comments.